Hello, my name is Soliday, and today I'll be talking about chapter 19 of the book, which is called Friend of the Victim, the Case of the Murdered Student. So this chapter starts off by talking about how a student at North Carolina, one of the universities there, was murdered around half a mile away from the campus. The student that was murdered was a senior, and her name was Carson, and she was the president, I believe, of the university student body. Yeah, she was university student body president. And of course, after her passing, instantly on the same day or the next day, journalists and stories were working on their way to provide a story. Well, one of the university's I guess journalists and news channels hopped on the story, and a person whose name was Adam was one of the main journalists who decided to write it because they asked him. And Adam was a journalist, and he was also a friend of Carson. So he felt like it was a really good idea for him to be put on this story because he could provide both ways, but still try to remain really professional with the journalist aspect of the story. And started off, and Adam knew that as a journalist, he couldn't, he could add emotion, but he couldn't add too much emotion to where, it was just like, it was just too much, and he really just write about her instead of the story. So Adam, throughout this chapter, he remained really professional and tried to guide his ethics towards what he thought was right in doing these things. And one of the many things while he was writing the story was, since it was so new and so fresh, there wasn't a lot of good sources, and Adam and the other journalists that were working on the story tried to do their best sources of what they think happened. And Adam had ties in with some of the officers that were there, working with him previously, and he got some of their sources. And the news company that he works for said that they typically don't just do like uncredited sources in a way, like they hardly do it, but they felt like that's the only thing they had to lead on was those uncredited sources, and just kind of had to go with what was said by the officers to them, and that is what they went with in that story. And then after writing the story, a couple days later, after figuring out after it was released to the public exactly who it was, they had obviously at the university a candlelight vigil, and Adam was there along with a couple other journalists, and they were being journalists, and they were recording it and doing audio, and they were mainly just trying to capture the vigil and trying to write it for news and for journalism's sakes. And this right here kind of brought up controversy between some of the people at the vigil and the journalists, because the people at the vigil thought that the journalists shouldn't even be there. They should leave them alone. They don't really know her, even though Adam does, but he's working as a journalist. And the journalist said that they're doing this for the people who can't come and for added information. So there was that. Adam said luckily he knew his rights as a journalist, and he knew that he could be there and that the law was on his side for these kind of things. And then after that, Adam learned a couple things. Besides, having the uncredited sources, he knew that there was a lot of things that were being said about the story that he knew wasn't true, and there were some that he thought he didn't true. So he knew as a journalist, he had to make sure and correct them and tell people, like what really happened and what he thinks, and what led up to it. And after the vigil, the story was produced, and Adam learned things in a way that is said in the chapter kind of towards the end. He said that he would have done some things differently. He said that he would have been more professional, and he would have done other reports as a journalist, because he was asked by the story became international or national, and he was asked by CNN and Fox, CBS, and etc. To do interviews with them. And Adam agreed, but he agreed to do it as a friend. And he said that he should have done it as a journalist. He said the reason for this was, as a journalist, it gets kind of a lot of the attention and drama away from really close personal friends and family of hers, and it kind of puts it on him, and he can work at it as a journalist and kind of stay in contact and in touch and remain on those news channels as a journalist and as what happened instead of like really personal information and maybe bad things about the university. Because it said that they asked him, one news channel asked him about the university security, and he said he wasn't there. Adam said he wasn't there to answer those kind of questions. He was there for Carson, and the news channel said that they didn't want to talk to him. As a journalist, that would have gone differently, and they probably would have talked to him. So, my thoughts on this chapter are, I believe that they should have waited, because it was still fresh and literally like still brand new. Hardly anybody knew who the person was besides the people who were doing the story. I believe there should have been a time period on Carson. They should have waited a little bit before, and make sure they had facts, good sources, and they knew exactly what happened. And just to give time for the people who knew her and, people who are mourning. And I believe Adam even said that in one of the things he said he wished, because since it was so new, Adam didn't have a break. He hardly had little time to make sure sources were credible and to write a story. So he kind of decided to get something and roll with it, hoping that it was good and it was good enough to tell what happened, whether it was right or wrong. And he said that Adam said he wished that there would have been a grace period, at least 72 hours, or just, take more breaks in between. And I do agree with that. I believe there should have been some time before they decide to write a story and have it be national when all sorts of things happened. I do appreciate Adam in the chapter remaining super professional. He didn't really put on a lot of emotions, and he really never hinted that he was also a friend of hers in some sort. But I believe that balancing that was okay, but he definitely you could always put more emotion. Because you can always put, hey, I'm a friend and a journalist, but emotion is what attracts people to a story. It's what builds it up and what makes good context, and it's still providing truth in a way. So I believe, as you could say, as a journalist, I'm here, but as a friend, I'm mourning because of this and this and this. And I believe he remained too professional in a sense, and he could have balanced being a friend and a journalist, but still having that really good work ethic. Overall, I believe that a lot of this is just they should just waited, and they should just wait till credible sources came. And when it comes to the candlelight vigil, I kind of agree with the people that were there. Nobody wants to be mourning while people are asking questions or have cameras and are talking, trying to catch this as like a news story. I believe because if I was a personal friend of Carson's, I would have been mad and I would have told him off, like, listen, we don't want your cameras. We don't want none of that. We're here as a collective group of people to mourn over this person, to feel for them, and to get emotions out, and then try to keep going after. I can see where the journalists, the media are coming from. Like, hey, we're doing this for the people who couldn't come, but most of the time they're just doing it just to capture news so they can gain more viewers and attention. So when it comes to this chapter overall, I believe I learned a little bit about the journalist and how much they go through and the aspects of a fresh case versus one that should be put on later, on hold until everything is right. And it kind of teaches you mistakes, and it teaches you what all should and shouldn't happen. And overall, this was an okay chapter, and it wasn't bad. And that's all I got. Peace.